So for those of you here for the first time, I have a spectacular private library, and I have a wonderful opportunity each year at TEDMED to share some of the treasures from the library. Here's just a short video. When I say a private library, it's a little bit unfair. It's about 30,000 volumes of books, manuscripts, artifacts, all about the history of human imagination. And of course, health and medicine is central to that history of human imagination. And so once a year, I get up enough nerve to take some of the treasures out of the library and travel on a commercial plane with them, carefully keeping track of them. And so today, I'm going to share some what-if moments from the library where I specifically went and said, let's talk about some what-if magic that happens. And here you can sort of see the central platform where the leap of imagination is a glass bridge that goes into the middle of the library. And here you can just sort of get a sense of the scale of the library here. You can see the glass bridge above you. So with that, we're going to shift and go to the live view here. And I've started with this one small book. And it doesn't look like much on the outside here. It's called The Mirror or Glass of Health. And what this book is about, it's about a shift in paradigm. You see, until about 1600, people had no sense that they had anything to do with their own health. And this book began the change. So what if we actually could do something about our health? And so a man named Moulton in 1539, in English, this is the first time it appears in English, begins to put together a manual of how to be healthy, how to prevent disease, how to think for the first time to be responsible for your own health. And it's printed by the first woman printer in England. And so this is the oldest book in English talking about how you can do, for the first time, things for your own health. Now, I'm going to jump ahead here to a very famous moment in the what if. And I'm going to go to 1854, when there is an epidemic of cholera in London. And a man named Joseph Snow decides there must be a reason for this cholera epidemic different from the reason that everybody else says. And there's two prevailing reasons why cholera happens. The first and most important reason is it's God's will, and if you get cholera, you deserve it. It's God's choice. Be done with it. That's the dominant wisdom of the age. However, medical, quote-unquote, professionals believe it's not. They believe it's bad air. John Snow thinks differently. He thinks it's in the water. And so he does the first approach of an epidemiological survey. And this is the original map where he literally tracks all of the cases of cholera, pinpoints them on a map, and he notices a concentration of cholera right around a pump, which is called the Broad Street pump, where people are getting their water. He realizes it's got to be the water supply. Nobody believes him. Everybody calls him crazy. What does he do? He takes the handle off the pump and steals it. So they can't get water. And guess what happens within days? The cholera epidemic subsides. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the first piece of epidemiological research, the first case of an intervention to stem a disease outbreak, and he is vilified for 25 years by the medical establishment. In fact, we wouldn't even know much about it if a major preacher hadn't come out against him and called him godless for the work. And because of that, he was researched by this preacher who then turned around and said, I was wrong. It turns out it was indeed the water supply. So the attack of the medical establishment is what did it. Now here's another example of how powerful expertise is. I brought from the library a bloodletting calendar, an official bloodletting calendar for the year 1472. This describes exactly when physicians should bleed you, the young, the old, and everything about it. Here is an official bloodletting calendar. You see, being wrong doesn't mean not being precise. Quite often in the history, we are intimidated by the data. We believe that experts know because they have data, because they have big charts and graphs, and they can prove that they're right. Of course, we know from historical that bloodletting calendars are not the answer. Speaking of blood, one of the most famous examples of the authority of blood is an ancient Roman authority, a man named Galen, who for 1,000 years basically held back modern science with theories of why the human body is the way it is. In fact, they believed that all the blood in your body, mostly the venous blood, was manufactured by your liver, and it was continuously reabsorbed and manufactured until a man named Harvey published this book in 1628. And this is the first time in the history of the world that a man says, what if the heart pumps the blood around and around the body? And these are the only two plates in De Mortu Charis, which basically separates the moment in time when we realize it's the heart that's circulating the blood. It's not the blood being manufactured by the hundreds of pounds per day in the liver. Now I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit to the surgical manual for the Civil War in the United States, because I'm going to show you one of the great moments of what if here. And this is the actual field surgical manual for the Civil War in the United States by a man named Pancoast. And you can see here they're doing an extirpation of the mammary gland on this poor woman who obviously will not survive. And take a look what's going on here. There are no gloves. There is no theory of germs in the Civil War. This is only 140 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, where doctors are reaching into the human body literally untreated with their hands, haven't been washed. They've gone from patient to patient. In fact, that was considered good medical practice. A doctor with dirty hands and blood on their garments proved that they were a good doctor. Look how busy and active they were. You wouldn't want somebody with clean clothes. They'd be a newbie. You see, this man went mad when he discovered the real truth. This is one of the rarest books in all of history of medicine. It's nothing pretty to look at. It's published by a Hungarian man named Semmelweis. For those of you that are doctors, you may know the story of Semmelweis, but very simply, Semmelweis noticed that in childbirth in Vienna, that the medical school students who went straight from the morgue right to the obstetrician wards, their patients were all dying in droves, whereas the midwives who were not allowed in the morgue, their patients didn't die at all. And he did page after page of analysis. He used data to prove his point, that the data was unambiguous, that it was literally an agent, something that was on the hands of these people. And he forced in Vienna the doctors, the medical students to wash their hands, and the medical deaths plummeted. And every doctor in Vienna attacked him. Every last one. They drove him out of the medical profession into an insane asylum where he died unrecognized. He realized this back in 1846. It would be 30 years before the medical profession recognized that the invisible agents of bacteria and viruses could be stemmed and prevented simply through good hand washing. In fact, this book by Lister in 1870 in Edinburgh proved that washing and antisepsis worked, and in Edinburgh, they rejected him too. They pushed back and back. Why? Because we love our explanations, ladies and gentlemen. We love them to death. Okay, so now I'm going to take the greatest moment in the history of human imagination. It's an astronomy story. And I'm going to open to this page. All right. This is a chart of the orbits of the planets around the Earth. And you'll notice that when you chart the orbits of the planets around the Earth, they seem to do pirouette dancing motions. They seem to go backwards. Well, that makes good sense. Right here, you've got the Earth in the center, and if you watch in the night sky and chart the motion of Mars and Venus, guess what? They appear to go backwards, much like if you're in one train, another train pulls up going faster than you do, your train appears to be going backwards. It's a relative motion of the two planets. But nobody could figure out why this is. In fact, the most beautiful book in the history of science tried to explain it because Aristotle was very clear that everything in space was on perfect spheres. This is the most beautiful book probably ever done in the history of science. This is the front cover, and it's called the Caesarium, the Astronomicon. And what this book is, and it's done only by men. I like to joke because women could never have done something so stupid. Okay. Appianus produces perfect descriptions, all right, of why the planets go backwards. Perfect. All right, and here's the reason. You need to put everything on circular wheels, ladies and gentlemen. And once you do that, once you put every single planet on its own perfect circular wheel, you can perfectly predict exactly where the planets are going to be. All you have to do is contort the data to exactly match what you want it to say. Okay? And he produces, and these strings here had pearls on them, beautiful pearls, and they produced 30 copies only for kings and royalty to explain why the planets were going backwards. All right, why were the planets going backwards? Well, of course, the Earth is not in the center of the solar system is the reason the planets. And it's not until 1701 where essentially Copernicus's work is rediscovered that the error is described, and this is the first time a celestial atlas does it. So here you see very quickly in the center, right, the Earth in the center with the perfect spheres. So this is one explanation of the world, all right, and now we're going to show you the first celestial atlas in the history of the world. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the dividing line between faith and reason, because it makes no sense. This atlas says the Earth is spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour. It says the sun is not coming up in the morning and going down in the evening. It says we are spinning. And it's also saying that the Earth is traveling around the sun. There is no evidence for that, is there, ladies and gentlemen? Nobody feels the motion. Nobody feels anything is moving. This is the power of evidence. This is the power of what if. What if I can demonstrate, I can perfectly predict where every planet is going to be as long as I prove that to do that, the sun is in the center of the solar system. So ladies and gentlemen, here you're seeing it, the greatest leap of human imagination. A complete rejection of your senses. That solid Earth, it's spinning. You can't feel it? Too bad for you. The facts are the facts, right? That explains day and night. That explains why we're going around the sun. And by the way, they even had the notion of the orbits being elliptical because when they did the math, they realized the orbits couldn't be circular. They had to be slightly elliptical. This is exaggerated, but they had it right. And they even had the idea correct that the angle of the Earth described the seasonality variances from the sunlight and the angle to and how it struck the Earth. All of this, ladies, is the power, and gentlemen, is the power of what if. Here you're seeing it, the greatest moment in imagination in human history. Thank you very much.